Hi there. I'm going to try to explain how you can use a single instrument original and multiple aliases of that instrument and also multiple different chord triggers without having to have an original instance of that instrument for each different chord trigger. And this is all possible by using the IAC driver that is included with all Mac computers and also a free plugin called Ripchords, which is available here at this website, trackbout or trackbout.com. And it's a free plugin, very simple to use. And the reason we need to use that is because the built-in chord trigger plugin within MainStage, for some reason, doesn't get along with this method of using aliases through the IAC driver. But I'm just going to quickly try to be as quick as possible to show you how to set this up. So I've just got a demonstration file ready to go here with basically some patch 1 and patch 2, which I'm going to fill in with the instruments shortly. And currently it just has my microphone and everything, and also my original strings instrument, which is here. Just the built-in strings, although it'll work with any instrument. And then what I also do is I have all my chord triggers saved as a separate patch within my originals folder, just so I have a place where I know they're all kept, and I label them as I go, which I'll show you as we build this. So first thing you need to do is activate the IAC driver. Well, actually, you might as well download this plugin first. So download Ripchord and get that installed. And it's an audio unit plugin, so it's easy to use and it works well within MainStage. So once you've got that, back in MainStage, just go to Preferences, MIDI, Setup. And this window doesn't always show up, so you might have to go up here and click on Window and Show MIDI Studio. And you should see this IAC driver box, which is normally grayed out unless you've used the IAC driver before. So just double click on that. It should look like this. There should be one ready to go, and you can click here to turn the device on. And I believe you can only have 2 instances of this, and each one of them has 16 channels. So that would be 32 different channels that you can use. And if you're careful, you could probably reuse some channels if you're doing something like a huge project and you need lots of chord triggers. I think there's a way that you could be smart about it and reuse some of these channels, but I like to keep each channel dedicated for each instrument just to keep things clean until I can't any longer. But I believe you can have 2. So to add another one, you can just go and click the plus sign, and it'll automatically name it. If you want to rename it, you could just click up in here and you can call it whatever you want. But I'll just leave it like that. The name doesn't really matter. Click apply. Exit out of this. And then close out of this. Okay, and then the other thing you're going to need to do is on the layout page, you could drag a new keyboard up for each one of the IAC channels, but I've discovered that the MIDI activity object will actually do the same thing and pass all of the MIDI info through it without taking up much space on your layout screen. So I just drag that object onto the screen and I shrink it right down. Since it's not really something you're going to be looking at, you just need to have the object there. And then once it's there, you can just copy and paste another one. And then using the arrows up and down, left and right, you can kind of place it so that they're all right beside each other. So you have a nice clean layout. And I usually put 16 all beside each other here because you'll be assigning the channels 1 through 16 to each one of these for the IAC bus 1, and then you could also have an IAC bus 2 with another 16. So I think I'm going to give up. I think it's clear what you can do here, or at least once you're through the demo, you'll understand exactly what you need to do. So let's start assigning some of these. So click on the first one, and let's assign it to be IAC bus 1 and channel 1. Oops. There we go, channel 1. And then the next one, Still bus 1, but channel 2. And channel 3. Channel 4. And channel 5, and I think I'll just save some time here. I won't assign all of them, just get rid of these extras here. And just be sure I've got them all here. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's do the last one. So that's bus 1 again, channel 6. And you've got up to 16 channels, and then you also have 16 more on IAC2, and I think that's all you can do on a Mac. I haven't seen it work with more than 2 IAC, but that still gives you 32 channels. And then while we're here, we're going to want to add a sustain pedal object. I'm not going to get into the details. I think you can figure out how to make things work. But if you don't have this extra object, you might find that some of your triggers don't work with the sustain pedal. So let's just stick it on there and just keep the settings like the default settings. Yeah, just leave them all here, just like that. And let's get back to setting this up here. Okay, so now we've got our strings. I'm going to copy it as an alias and stick it in the chord trigger here. So that's just the just using the hotkeys to do that. So it's an alias, you can see. And now I'm going to make it so that this input here, the MIDI input, is from IAC driver 1. So now if I play on the keyboard, we're not going to hear anything because the MIDI signal from my keyboard is going out of MainStage to the IAC driver, and it's coming back in through this little MIDI object back into here. And the reason we're not hearing anything is because we need to make an external instrument. Sorry, I missed a step. So we have to go here, external instrument, out channel 1. There we go. Now we've got all the pieces we need. So now what's happening is this is like the same thing as if you wanted to use another MIDI keyboard or like external instrument, but instead of it actually being a real instrument, we're using the IAC bus as sort of a virtual external instrument. So now when I play on my MIDI keyboard, the signal is going through this object here because I've assigned this to be my audio interface with the MIDI input. So my keyboard is playing, I'm playing the MIDI notes on the keyboard, and it's going out through this channel as an external instrument to the IAC bus, and then it's coming back into MainStage through this object here, that little MIDI indicator, back to this channel strip, which is the strings. So that's why we're hearing information, or audio. And what's cool is you can have this, the original, set up to be a different input. So on this patch, if I play on my audio interface, on my MIDI keyboard, I'm hearing it directly without going through the IAC bus. But here, it's the same instance of the instrument, but on this one, it's taking the input from the IAC bus, which is being sent out here, like I said, through that MIDI activity object and then back in. So what this allows us to do is we can put a chord trigger on here. So I'm just going to set a quick one up. I'm going to play middle C, and when I do that, it's going to play a C major chord. And I'm going to do another one. When I play the D, it's going to do the same chord. Okay. So here we go. Here's the C major by only playing C. Now, there's a problem, though, with chord trigger in that it doesn't, for some reason, it doesn't work with this setup. And here's what I'm going to show you. Here's the problem. So if I've got two notes that trigger the same, any of the same notes, let me change one of these here. I'm going to make it so that when I play the D, it's going to play an E minor chord. So when I play C major, we've got C, E, G, C, and when I play the D, it's triggering E, G, B, E, but the E and the G overlap with the first chord. So any overlapping notes, when you hold the first chord and play the second chord trigger, and then let go of either of them, even though you're still holding it, so it took the release message of the E and the G from the E minor and made the E and the G stop being sustained, and so now we're only hearing the C and the C in octaves. And same thing if we go the other way. So I'm holding that C major, I play the E minor, we hear both of them, but then I let go of the C major. Now it turned off the E and the G as well, and now we're only hearing the B and the E. It's some weird thing about chord trigger, but there's a workaround. So I just wanted to show you that it's working this way. And I'm just going to take that plugin off, and I'm going to add this audio unit track about Ripchord. So this lets me do the exact same thing, except there's one little thing you need to work around and set up, and that is that if you don't assign a note, like if let's say I just play on the keyboard now, every note is going to have a sound to it, and it doesn't. What am I trying to say? If you need gaps in your chord triggers, like let's say you want to trigger on this note and this note, but you want these notes to be silent, you have to actually assign them to not sound anything. And so the workaround that I came up with is you have to click Edit to edit this, and there's no learn mode just yet, so you have to actually do it manually with your mouse. So this is the input, middle C, and I want it to sound this C major chord. Okay, and then on this note, we're going to do that E minor chord. So now those two are assigned, but this C sharp isn't assigned. So by playing that C sharp, it's going to sound the C sharp. But with chord trigger, if you've assigned here and here, anything in the middle is going to be a dead note. And so that Ripchord doesn't do that. So the workaround that I've come up with is I just make the bottom note. I make all the notes assigned to the bottom note, and then I just set my actual instrument not to sound on that note by changing the layer. So I'll just show you that quickly. I know I'm jumping around a bit. It's hard for me to show you everything while I'm working with one hand and the other hand is holding the microphone here, but basically I set the layer of my original and my alias, so I should do it here as well, so that it's not going to sound on this note if it receives the MIDI information to play that note. And now every time I copy that, it's going to have that saved. Same thing here. So it's not going to play on that note. So on my Ripchord, if I play any other note, I have to assign it to be that bottom note. And I have to go through this. So what I've done is I've saved a preset that basically starts at that point. And I've got it already in here. So it's all notes off, basically. So any note that I play is just going to play that bottom note, which you can see here. So it should be just complete silence because nothing is sounding on that note. So in that way, you can have gaps. And so when I want to make a new trigger, I click on Edit, and I edit that note. So C, I want to not have that note sound, although it doesn't really matter. You can leave that note on there. I just like to take it off. And I'm going to make that my C major chord. And then I'm going to make this note my E minor chord. And again, this doesn't really matter. I just like to take it off. So now I've got those two, and everything else is just that bottom note. And so now while I'm in edit mode, I can call this something else. So I'm going to call it trigger 1. You can basically call it whatever you want. If you want to be able to keep track, you could call it strings trigger 1, and then you'd have different triggers for horns or brass or what have you. And then also, I'm a fan of backing things up, so I just like to save it. So you can click up here, export current preset, and you can save it. I've already got some in here, so I'll just save over top of that, replace it. So now I've got trigger 1. Here we go. So it should be nothing, nothing. And then when I play middle C, I've got my C major chord and my E minor chord. And with Ripchord, I'll show you so you can see it. Ripchord does work properly. So now I'm holding C major, I'm playing the E minor trigger, and now if I let go of that E minor trigger while I'm still holding C major, all the notes are still sounding. It's not just the 2 outside notes. So it's working the way that I believe chord trigger should work. And here's the opposite. I let go of the C major trigger, and I've still got the full E minor chord. So that's important if you have any overlapping notes between your chord triggers and you're playing them connected. If you have a slight gap between it, then chord trigger works just fine. But I don't think it's practical. Like, not every song plays like that. If you're playing a legato passage where it's all triggers and you happen to have any overlapping notes, even the same note, like between 2 triggers, like if you're playing like a chromatic scale to play a whole triggered sequence, then you're going to have gaps, like silence, because it's going to release the sound of the new note when you release the last note. So there's at least a workaround. By using Ripchord, it solves that problem. And so the last thing is, so now I've got a complete patch. So I'm going to copy this as an alias. And I'm going to paste it. Oh, I don't want to overlap my mic, so I'm just going to go back here. Paste this into patch 1 as an alias. Just going to keep it in the same order. So now, this is my patch where I'm actually using that chord trigger. So it's going out to IAC bus 1 through that object, back in here, because the input here is IAC bus 1, channel 1, and it's an alias. So now for patch 2, I can set up another one of these. So I can copy this and just paste it. So these don't take up much memory. I'm going to call this first one trigger 1. Second one I'm going to call trigger 2. And now again, this isn't where you'd want to be really testing these things out. It's more of a storage place. Where you're going to want to use them is up in here. But like I said, this is just so you have all the triggers in the same place. So now I'm going to make a new Ripchord. I'm going to start from my all off. I'm going to edit, and I'm going to make this now middle C is going to be a C diminished 7, and let's make D D diminished 7, just so we can really hear the difference from the C major chords. And just for to make it different, I'll leave that on the bottom there. And I'm going to call this one trigger 2. And just so I have a backup again, in case I have to reload everything, I don't know, I've never had a problem, but just in case, I'm going to save that. There we go. So I'm not going to play it in here because it's also going to sound this trigger, right? Because they're both assigned to the same notes. It'll just be a cacophony of sound. But I'll copy these 2 tracks and put them in patch 1 as an alias. Oops, I did something wrong. There we go. Move this over here just so it's in the same order. So now we've got another chord trigger, trigger 2, with the same instrument alias. And I think you can see how you can build this. You can have a whole bunch of chord triggers all with the same alias. So here we are playing middle C. This should be C major and E minor. And if I go to patch 2, it should be C diminished 7 and D diminished 7. And so I can keep going. I could do another one. I could copy this, paste it here, call it trigger 3. Go in and edit this. I'll start from my all off edit that. Let's make C, let's make it some sort of big weird chord, I don't know. And let's make this a crunch here. And let's call this trigger 3. Okay, and now we're going to copy these two channels. Oh, actually, I need a new patch first, so I'm going to copy and just paste it as an alias. Call it patch 3. And I can leave this because it's just an alias, and I can erase that, and I can copy just this, which is the IAC bus with my trigger 3 on it, and paste that here as an alias. And I like to put it first or beside, always just beside where it's being used. And that's it. And there we have a new one. And that's the crunch. And that's that weird chord of whatever that was. That's basically it. Hope this was helpful.